Recording in progress.
How do I make it? Ooh.
Hi, Heather. Can you hear me all right? Oop, I can't hear you because you're muted.
Yeah, there we go.
Oh,
Okay,
thanks for the update. We'll see you soon. Bye. That was Steve. He's on his way.
How was it, Leo?
So Lisa can't make it, Patrick can't make it.
Excellent.
So, but if we have, as long as Molly also comes, then we'll have a forum.
Like this big.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you good.
Great.
Oh, and Andy. There's Molly. Hey, Molly.
Hey. God, gosh, it's so rainy.
So rainy and we're back in
You guys
winter.
have fun.
I know.
Thank you.
I was planning on biking over and then I got into the garage and I was like,
Oh.
it's not gonna happen.
It's been such a weird day too, because it was a torrential downpour, and then it was like sunny and beautiful at one
Yeah.
time, and then
Yeah, it's so weird.
the torrential downpour. So you guys, we realized the packet kind of somehow got screwed up at the last minute, probably because we were working on it last minute, as you know. So we have some corrected, I'll say more formally, but just to clarify. So for the item number 7, it just kind of got various, the staff report got cut off, and then some of the attachments got cut off. So
Okay.
sorry about that. So obviously you won't have had a chance to read it all, so we'll, just leave it open and you guys can send us any other comments after the fact.
Okay.
There he is. Hi.
Hello.
Hey, Steve.
How's it going?
I think we actually, because we only have 6 members currently, so 3 of 6 is a quorum, I think. How does that work when you have an even number? Is 50% considered a quorum?
I think so.
Yeah, okay. I haven't, do we know if Andy is coming? Do you have-
If he is, he's probably waylaid by the rain because he usually bikes and buses.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, I think I could email or text him.
What were you?
We'll have to, do carpooling sometime.
I should have offered him a ride.
Yeah.
Now that I think about it, that was so silly. I should have picked him up from the terminal.
Oh, from the county terminal.
Yeah.
I tried that before, and that's my schedule, that's screwy today.
Would anybody like some water? Let me get you a glass of water from the kitchen.
I got
You good?
Katie.
Have a little bit.
Pretty much one of the here.
Courtney? Appreciate that. Well, I mean, we do have, oh, there he is. I see him on his bike. Awesome.
And doesn't stop.
Yeah. I'd be happy to make, if anybody would like a cup of tea, I'd be also happy to heat up some water for tea. Would anybody like tea?
I'm a tea person.
Oh, yeah. Caffeine or decaf? We have some lemon ginger and some rooibos, and some, trying to think what other non-caffeinated teas we have. Those might be the only 2. Then we've got green tea and black tea as well. Any preferences?
Hello, Andy. Welcome.
Hey, Andy. Sorry. No problem. Do you need some dry clothes? Okay.
Non-cap.
Non-cap, green if you got it.
Green, I have green, but it's not decaf.
Okay.
Do you want lemon ginger or
Sounds
rooibos?
good.
Lemon ginger? Okay. Steve, would you like lemon ginger or rooibos? Or
Is it me?
lemon ginger or rooibos tea?
Lemon ginger sounds fine.
Molly? can I
Oh,
introduce
you're so
you?
sweet. I'm okay.
Okay.
Thank you though. Yeah.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Andy, would you like some hot tea?
Yes, please.
Lemon ginger, okay?
That's perfect, thank you.
Okay.
Hello.
Andy, how you doing?
Good, how about you?
Good.
Did you bike from the transit center?
From Davis.
Oh, all the way from Davis, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I was gonna say that, next time we should coordinate and I can pick you up from the transit station or something or meet you. I was gonna bike too, but, cause I only live like an 8-minute bike ride away from here, but
The
I
rain.
made the lazy decision to
I
drive.
thought they didn't, I thought the rain was done and then
Yeah.
between us, I was trying to.
You and everybody else, I think.
Yeah.
Actually, literally, as I was getting my bike sort of out and getting up, making sure my lights were working, my husband was like, it might rain, and I was like, no, the weather doesn't say rain. He's like, that's what it said earlier when it was in the rain anyway, so.
Yeah, I was trying to, yeah, when I saw, I could see that dark cloud coming, I was trying to outrun it. I was until I got into, it was when I got into Woodland that it started.
I had to play some tennis this morning between the rain. We had to pause twice between 9 and 10:30 or something.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I saw that crazy downpour, and then it was so strange because the water just, it was so short, it just dried up and there was like no rain. No record of the rain, like it was like as if it hadn't happened. It was so dry. Yeah, here we go
This is interesting. Eventually, my name will get corrected. Heather, my first name is actually a PH, and it never got fixed. It's not your fault, it's kind of a carryover. So it can make it,
No idea, Steve.
I know. It was carried over from Kathy before.
You should have said something. It's like when people call me Amber and I don't correct them.
Yeah.
I'm guilty of it.
I show up at parts of the agenda, Steve, and other places, Steve.
I'm gonna start calling
My
you.
name is called, it's always with
Yeah,
spell.
oh, I know.
I'm actually like,
Sorry.
it's like, about it, because I'm sure you have in some ways.
Well, yeah. They sound the same.
Just exactly, like they spell with a Y and I'm like, you know, it's funny when people do it on email, when you like see my email signature in my email, the right spelling, and still you use the wrong spelling, I'm shocked by that, but you know, it's okay, people are infallible.
To just soothe my nervous system just enough to keep it going.
We had somebody patiently waiting to talk to her.
Oh, okay, we should get, I think we should get a move on. The tea, I will just pop out and grab the tea once the water is boiled. Did everybody get some of these documents?
I
Yes.
think I have everything I need.
Okay,
Is
Yeah,
any
there
of
is the,
our members? Oh, yeah,
so no, we don't have anybody, I'm not sure who's, is it,
Daisy.
oh, Daisy's participating. Oh, okay, great. It's just a staff person. It's one of our wonderful staff.
Should we use this one that we just got tonight?
It is it's the same one. The agenda is the same thing. Yeah, but it's just the attachments, the staff report and attachments for agenda item 7 were screwed up. So that's what you have printed in front of you. It's just a corrected staff report and attachments. So apologies about that. But yes, whenever you're ready.
Call to order.
Sure.
We call the meeting of the Citizens Advisory Committee to order and do roll call, please, Evan.
Woods,
Here,
Molly, okay, I'm sorry. City of Woodland, let's try that. Here. City of West Sacramento. City of Winters, Boston. City of Davis,
Here.
and Director at Large.
Here.
And we should, everybody use your mics, right? Because we are recording this
Here.
meeting. Just remember to press the button
Here.
so the light turns on in the screen.
So are there any comments from the public? Looks like we may have someone on the line there.
We do not have comments from the public at this time.
We just have staff.
Oh,
Participating
okay.
in
Oh, one of those staff reports, right? We're used to seeing Alan all the time.
I believe Mr. Hirsch is the Woodland, Winter City Council tonight.
Okay.
He sent some, yeah.
So we can move on to approval of the minutes then. I noticed your last name changed a few times in there on Brillo.
Let's see, it's F, yeah, it's FURILLO, I haven't, had a chance to take a close look, but.
One thing I wanted to comment on or appreciate is the CAC member stipends. I don't know if others went through that, but appreciate the board of directors offering that option. Oh, and the other thing, Patrick Gill talked about the YCDD providing transportation assistance to maybe get some members here. And for those that are new, that actually was done from about July 2017 till January 2020 for Nathan and I to get here. They'd send a paratransit bus to Davis. So that's been done before. It wouldn't be a new thought, especially somebody with wheelchair or walker would need that kind of support. Any other comments or changes on the minutes? Is there a motion to approve them with any revisions that we can let her know about later?
So moved.
Okay,
Second.
moved by Molly, second by Andrew. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, let's move on. To the next item. Item 5, administrative reports. A lot of us run.
Sure, I'm happy to go first, and then we also have CAC member reports as well on this
Oh,
item,
okay.
so. Would you like me to start, or would you like the CAC member reports first?
We might as well go in order. I was focusing on the administrative part, but are there any members that have something that they would like to share? All right.
Yes, so a couple of updates from the Davis commissions and committees. So I did attend the Unitrans Advisory Committee meeting as an alternate, I'm still their alternate representative. But the regular representative couldn't make it, and we approved the annual service changes for Unitrans. I mean, generally, pretty minor things, like made a couple of schedule adjustments so that there'd be less conflicts between buses going through the UC Davis campus during passing periods to get to the silo terminal. Just like little tweaks in the schedule, and then also swap the schedules of a couple of the lines actually that overlap with the 42, the Z line and the A line that run along 5th Street. That had been the Z line went to Memorial Union and the A line went to the silo, but then they swapped those because the Z line's like a bit shorter. And the A line also is importantly, that's the one line that serves the area the 42 used to in South Davis. And that one will now go to Memorial Union rather than silo, with Z line going to silo. That's the update on Unitrans. Also, from the last BTSSC, Bicycling Transportation and Street Safety Commission meeting, a couple items we discussed there's the plans for a new overpass or underpass at the train station to get between Olive Drive and downtown. I know there was some spirited discussion about which option was preferred between the overpass and the underpass on that, and then. Also, we recommended that City Council approve the Vision Zero plan for Davis, which had been on their consent calendar tonight. I know there've been some changes to their agenda tonight to talk about some of the stabbings that have been going on. So I'm not sure if they're still doing the consent calendar or not, but I know it had been scheduled for tonight. But those are my updates. Thank you.
I have a clarifying question. What was Unitrans proposing to do? Because I know they had expanded shuttle service for UC Davis students. And I guess what was Unitrans also doing anything extra?
Oh, for the
Or relating to this security concerns?
Oh, yeah, I don't know of anything. I know like the Safe Ride service had been moved to start earlier at 8 p.m. I think that normally didn't start until after Unitrans ends for the night, more like 10 or so, but if to my knowledge, there haven't been any changes to Unitrans service.
Right.
Go ahead.
Andy, what was the conclusion on the discussion of tunnel versus overcrossing at the train station?
Oh, there hasn't been but we didn't wind up making cause I mean, it's still so early in the process, like they don't have, I mean, the cost estimates for the underpass versus the overpass aren't out. But I think, there are a lot of concerns, I mean, a lot of like the people who live right around there, and I think particularly in like old East Davis prefer the underpass, just because they're worried about like the overpass affecting
Oh, you found one anyway, okay.
views
sure,
and stuff
fine.
like that,
You're on
but right, it's still like quite early in the project.
The safety issues were brought up about the underpass.
Yeah, and that was part of the discussion too, people, I mean, there were concerns about, I mean, there were some folks that definitely prefer the overpass because of the safety issue, and also just like the way the bike path would be designed would be kind of would be like kind of a like this to get into the underpass from the train station, while the overpass would be like a more. But then the overpass, I think it was just some of the local residents had like concerns about the.
It's gonna take more right away.
Yeah, and just the vision and just some of the stuff about like views and stuff like that, but it's still like so early, and again, the cost estimates aren't out, we didn't make a recommendation like either way yet, so.
I imagine that the overpass would be preferred to the underpass, just for safety partly,
Yeah, that's definitely how plenty of people felt.
and going underneath the ground at nighttime would be a little frightening. I'm familiar with that because the Lincoln 40 apartment project on
Oh, okay,
Olive Drive is paying for the major share of that,
yeah,
like, yeah, they called it, they're calling it now Rider on Olive. So
yeah.
it's a wonderful facility. It's
Oh.
amazing. It's more like a resort for students than typical apartments.
And
Go
I've
ahead.
got some comments.
Sure, go ahead.
Appreciated, you're sending Brian in your place to the YoloTD meeting last week. And he made some excellent observations and points, and was a useful member right away. And so thank you.
Glad to hear it.
And then the TAC is missing some members, and so if any of you are interested in applying for a position on the Yolo TAC, Technical Advisory Committee, I know it would be appreciated. This is the county. So something to think about.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Did you have anything you wanted to share? Okay. Just one comment, I got a pen on Sunday. There was an event at the Veterans Memorial High School parking lot with Touch a Truck. And it was wonderful to have the Yolo bus that was for Natalie Corona, remembering their, thank you for getting that specifically, since the fundraiser is going to go toward Natalie's corner to Central Park. And what was Henry's response? Was he all over the place honking horns? And
He had a great time.
Okay. Yeah, several people were asking, is this going to be an annual event? And I think it'll probably be for at least several years. Okay, let's move on to now your items.
You bet. Okay, so for my executive director's report, I wanted to share a couple of things. One thing, a few things on the agenda, and I apologize, I was on vacation last week, and so things were a little bit hectic with getting the agenda done and then the packet. So apologies that, you only got the agenda on Friday and then the packet yesterday, and there were some errors with the packet. We were just doing the best we could, but the timing wasn't great. So one thing, the zero emission bus plan, which this committee talked about at your last meeting, we now have a complete draft of it that was listed on the agenda as one of your agendized items. However, in the interest of time, and because we have some other fairly major other items on the agenda tonight, we put that in the administrative reports section so that it's still here and you can ask any questions about it and members of the public could comment on it, and we welcome your comments on that. That is going to go to the board for approval, not at this next meeting, but at the subsequent meeting in June. So the board's going to hear a brief presentation on it at next week's board meeting, but not approve it until June. So if there are any comments or questions about the plan, please send us those comments via email, and we'll make sure to either pass along your comments to the board and answer any questions that you may have. And Courtney and I just today met with Mitch Weiss from Valley Clean Energy to talk about ways that we might be able to partner to help kind of achieve a lot of the infrastructure changes that would be needed in order to transition to a zero emission fleet. And we're going to be asking for their kind of feedback as well on the plan over the next month before it's adopted. So I just wanted to flag that. And then also, as I mentioned, the agenda item 7, which is around microtransit policies and a service plan for Woodland. Some of the staff report got was shortened but accidentally, and also one of the attachments was as well. So we've included those in your packet, or I'm sorry, we printed corrected copies, and we'll send out corrected copies. Again, welcome your feedback and comments tonight, but recognizing that you haven't had a chance to review everything because it was not complete. Would welcome, any comments or questions that you have after the fact as well on those. So again, really apologize for that.
On one thing, on the, page 13 of the, which would be the zero emission bus rollout plan. It stated that the June 2023 board meeting. It sounded like it was already happening. I think you want to change was to will be.
Thank you. Yeah, this is kind of, that's language that sort of has to be in there, but it's sort of assuming that the board will approve it.
Yeah.
So you're right. So we should put a sort of caveat around that until it's actually approved. Yeah. Thank you.
I'm learning some new acronyms, ICT, innovative, clean transit, and some other things.
Yeah. Thank you for that comment. Any other comments or questions on that at this time? If not, I've got a few other things in my executive director's report. Okay, so a few other things. Just yesterday, we got the great news that we were awarded a $3 million grant from the Sacramento Area Council of Governments. Well, I should say staff is recommending it. It still needs to go to the Transportation Committee and then board for approval. But staff is recommending that we be awarded $3 million from their most recent funding round for our tolling advanced planning work. This is the work that we're doing in collaboration with SACOG and other and Caltrans partners across the region to establish essentially a tolling authority for the Sacramento region to, so that we can implement express lanes on 80, but then also we're trying to design it in such a way that it would be allowed for the rest of the region as additional express lanes come online, as is envisioned in the kind of regional transportation plan for the region, that those other facilities would be able to join our tolling authority. So it's great news. If we hadn't got that funding, we frankly weren't sure how we were going to be able to do all the technical work and studies that are needed to implement tolling on this corridor. So the fact that we've been awarded those funds means that we should be able to kind of move forward with all of that planning and technical analysis. So it's great news. Let's see. Steve, you mentioned the community event last weekend, the Touch a Truck. There was actually 4 different events that we were participating in last weekend. There was the bike rodeo in West Sacramento. Patrick, who's not able to be here tonight, sent us a great photo of his son, who had a great time at the bike rodeo. We were there with one of our vehicles demonstrating how to use our bike racks. We were also at the California Duck Days event. We had 2 buses giving that were with a docent giving tours of the Yolo bypass. And that was a big success. And as well, there was a Touch a Truck event at the Woodland Library, the Read, Rumble, and Rev on Saturday. So we were at all of those events this weekend. A really great kind of opportunity to kind of showcase Yolo Bus. And had a number of people who came up to me and said, I've never been on a bus before, neither has my kid. So it was great to get some people to get some exposure. Couple more things on the Yolo 80 project. Caltrans has now said that they are going to release the draft EIR for the construction of the project in late June. So we're going to be bringing that to you in July, and Citizens Advisory Committee we and Caltrans will be able to presenting kind of a summary of some of the key findings of the EIR and having an opportunity for the public as well as you to kind of ask any questions or offer any comments. As well, we are scheduled to come to the BTSSC, I believe, in May. I think it's actually this month, to give an initial presentation and then potentially return, I think, again, after the EIR is released. So stay tuned for more information on that. And then lastly, on the CAC.
Is the plan still to have 2, basically add 1 lane and take 2 away from the free flow?
It's just going to be to add 1 lane that would be a toll lane is the preferred alternative at this time. We are still talking with Caltrans about also converting one of the general purpose lanes to a toll lane, but that's not going to be part of this current EIR.
Okay, I'm one who's glad to hear that. I think it's a smart move.
Okay, great.
Did that go counter to YCTD's recommendation? Or how did that
I think
result?
it was a lot. There's been a lot. So, okay, sorry, can you ask the question again?
Sure, I'm just curious about how that how it resolved itself, because at one point, I think a couple of months ago, you had said that the YCTD recommendation was to have two protected lanes essentially, if you want to call it that, and then two free flow lanes, which
Okay.
concerned me because in my experience, to take something away from that people are used to
Mhm.
is just a problem.
So, I mean, there was just a lot of back and forth and conversations with kind of our board committee and Caltrans District 3 and Caltrans headquarters. We were kind of meeting monthly for about a year. And then kind of the end result was that we all sort of agreed to right now just pursue the one additional lane, the new lane, and then to revisit the idea of converting a general purpose lane down the road.
Okay,
Yeah.
I think that's smart.
I guess another clarifying question on that, so, for that general purpose lane, it doesn't go over the causeway. Would the toll lane go over the causeway or would it end before?
You know, the first phase of the project is from Richards Boulevard in Davis to the 80/50 split in West Sacramento.
Oh, okay, it is over there, so.
Yeah, so it is, yeah, it's a conversion of the inside shoulder for that entire distance.
Okay.
One more clarifying question on that. So is the preferred, so you mentioned the preferred option, is it a high occupancy toll lane that would also be open to like, would it be carpools and, would it be like free carpools or like not untold carpools and then single occupant drivers pay, or does everybody pay?
Yeah, the exact kind of tolling configuration is still to be determined as far as like, but yes, it would be some combination of carpools either are free or pay a discounted toll, depending on occupancy, and then it's single occupant vehicles would pay the full toll. I think that's, but those are all the kinds of things about, and are clean air vehicles exempt, et cetera. Those are some of the policy decisions that would have to be made, you know, prior to implementation. None of that has been determined at this point.
Thank you.
Sure.
I do have a follow-up to the Richards Boulevard renovation. Is that going to be accomplished before I-80 expansion?
I believe that project is fully funded and environmentally cleared at this point. If I'm not mistaken, that's a City of Davis project, so I don't know exactly, but I believe so.
I don't know, but tell me about that project.
Yeah, I can find out. I'm sure Brian could get that
I'm sure Brian
information
knows the
right away.
details. Sorry.
The basic idea at Richards would be what, Steve?
I thought it was on track to happen the next year or two, but
I
maybe.
think it's just redesigning that.
Redesigning the whole
April
intersection.
Okay, the whole interchange. Okay,
Yeah, I think it's like it's like, I'm not a super expert on that project, but I think it's a mix of like, if they want to redo, like, I think they want to convert it, because right now it's like kind of a clover leaf. I think they wanted to change it to more of like a diamond, like the configuration of the ramps, and they also want to put in a bike path.
Yeah, improved bike path for sure.
Last thing, I promise, which is, on the CAC member stipends, you know, as noted, the board did approve those. You know, Heather sent a couple of emails about where there is a required ethics training that the CAC members have to. Apparently, once we start offering stipends, then it's mandatory that you have to do the ethics training. I don't know why, but that is what our lawyers are telling us. So Heather has sent some information about that. And once you've completed the ethics training, then you're eligible to start receiving that stipend. You of course don't have to take the stipend, but you are welcome to it. Also, the other thing that the board approved was creating some additional at-large seats, and to particularly to add diversity to the board, or excuse me, to the committee. So we'll be, Heather and Chris are working together to put together kind of a recruitment package, if you will, of materials and application for people to apply, and some recruitment materials that we'll share with you, and would love your help in recruiting new members to the committee. So stay tuned for more details on that. And that's everything I have.
well, if you don't want the stipend, then are you still required to do the ethics training?
That's a good question. I think it's never a bad thing, put it that way.
So it's the same ethics that other public county.
It's
county
AB
officials need.
1234 or something like that, and it's this online video that you can do. Yes, I think you probably said if you serve on other bodies, which I know you do, you probably have already done it.
I haven't done the most recent one, and I'm hoping maybe I can kill two birds with one stone.
I think it's all the same.
Okay,
Yeah, if you do it for one board that you serve on, then you've done it for all of them.
all right.
Some of the questions on there, because I just finished up recently, had to do with planning commission, both Lisa Baker and I are serving, I'll soon be not serving in planning commission, but it's interesting to read some scenarios where planning commissioners are the focus with the ethical issues,
I see.
maybe compromising on some land use issues with some pay on the side or that sort of thing.
Interesting.
If anybody's getting kickbacks from Transdev, then you need to excuse yourself.
With that, we're moving on. Preliminary budget. That's,
So I'm gonna kick us off on that, and then Leo Levinson, who's also here with us via Zoom, is going to join in as well. So we actually, we don't have slides for this one, so we just wanted to share that. So the draft of the budget is in your packet. This is agenda item 6. And I just wanted to highlight a couple of the key changes in terms of major changes to the budget, and then Leo's going to talk to you a little bit, the kind of the long-term financial outlook for YCCD, because as we all know, it's kind of there's a those of you that follow kind of transit policy, broader transit policy, know that there's a lot of agencies that are approaching a fiscal cliff. And we're not as close to that cliff as other agencies, but it's certainly looming down the road. So we want to talk a little bit about that. So in terms of what's in the budget, there's a handful of changes to transit service that I wanted to highlight. One is increasing frequencies on the Route 42 AB to 30-minute headways all day. So as some of you may recall, this was the original recommendation in Yolo Go, and then the board modified that recommendation to have it be just 30-minute headways during peak hours with 45 minutes the rest of the day in order to kind of like see how it went. And what we've seen is, there's been a pretty, sharp increase in ridership since we implemented those changes. And so based on a conversation we had with the board where we reported back on how it's going with the 42, we are suggesting that we do go ahead and move that to 30 minutes all day headways. The budget also proposes restoring express bus service to South Davis, from South Davis to downtown Sacramento, based on some of the feedback that we heard from both the rerouting of the 42 and the elimination of the South Davis Express. That, bringing that back would mean that there's once again Yolo bus service on the south side of 80 in Davis. And then restoring evening service in West Sacramento. This is some evening service that was cut during the pandemic. And we have heard from riders that, they would like to see some of those evening trips restored. So those are the three major changes to transit service that we're proposing in this budget. And as well, we can continue to work on the Interstate 80 project, and that obviously that $3 million from SACOG is going to help a lot with that. And then on the capital projects.
Before you leave that, will YCTD lead that study for the entire region, or
Yes.
just for Yolo County?
For tolling?
Yeah.
Yeah, we are leading that because we have the project timeline that is looming. But we are doing it collaboratively with our partners at SACOG, as well as Sacramento, Placer, and El Dorado counties.
Okay, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
That YCTD was selected, and all the other counties are okay with that.
Well, I mean, we were not so much
Sure.
selected as, because we're the ones who are actually trying to do tolling. We have to establish tolling authority.
Okay, of course.
And so, but rather than just do it for our own county, we thought, let's take a regional approach and work with our regional partners to try to do it in a regional way rather than just as a single county.
Very good. You get any kickback from members, SACOG board members who don't like the idea of tolling in their counties?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about kickbacks like the other kickbacks we were talking
No,
about.
I mean,
Yeah, we did have,
happiness.
there has been, there was a SACOG board meeting to discuss it. And there was some pushback, from one or two members of the SACOG board.
That's a better word.
Yes, yes, they've expressed some concern, but so far, SACOG is continuing to move forward.
Okay, and the pushback, I presume, is.
So, can we get through the budget and maybe come back to this?
Sure.
Okay, I want to make sure this is a really important item, and I want to make sure we get your feedback and comments on the budget.
Good.
We can talk more about your.
Let's go.
Okay. So we also have the launch of the microtransit service in Woodland. A new capital project that's in there is the Downtown Woodland Transit Center. So the board at the last meeting did move ahead with a planning study, an additional funding for a planning study to identify a new transit center, an on-street transit center in downtown Woodland to get us out of the County Fair Mall, which is our current transit center in Woodland. And so we've included funds in this year's capital budget for actually implementing that change. And that's with that, I'm going to hand it over to Leo to talk a little bit about the kind of financial forecast.
Yeah, thank you, Autumn. Yeah, I wanted to leave plenty of time for questions rather than going through the document sort of table by table. But I thought it was worth looking at the last table that's in your package, which I think is on page 53 of the overall package, which is the table 3, the 5-year outlook in constant 2023 dollars, economic speak for taking out the factor of inflation. And
I'm not sure. Oh, hey, Leo, can you share that on your screen? Because I don't know that everybody has that in front of them.
Yeah,
okay,
we do.
sure.
I knocked that on the computer, but I
The host has disabled screen sharing, but can Heather, can you enable it?
Yep.
I still got it disabled. I'm sorry. I was assuming there would be copies of the packet, but I guess not. We're paperless.
Yeah, it doesn't let me,
It's not letting you?
yeah, not while the meeting is in session.
Oh dear.
Can you share?
Can you share that?
Well, I can do a little speaking to it. Let me see if I can draw a picture with words, and I do apologize for this. But so our overall budget, just looking at the operating budget, leaving aside the capital and planning budget, is approximately $20 million. It's about 19.6 million. And in the proposed 23-24 budget, we are proposing to use about 4 million of non-continuing funds. These are we're really trying to draw down the special stimulus funds that the federal government provided in response to the COVID pandemic and the economic downturn. And so we have 2 major kinds of those funds that we're using, something called ARPA and CARES Act. They're really 2 flavors that we can use very flexibly, and those funds don't require a local match, unlike our formula funds that we get every year from the federal government. So we wanted to look at what happens with really 2 factors moving forward in the budget. One is the loss of those 100% very flexible funds. And the second is making sure we looked at the cost of annualizing the service increases that we're planning in 23-24, because we're including 6 months of some of the increased service that Autumn mentioned. And so looking forward, if you move that service out to 12-month period, it adds about 1.4 million to the budget. And we'll be losing about 4 million of the diminishing federal dollars. We'll have about 3 million actually more left that we can use one more budget year in 24-25 of the CARES Act money. And then we predict we'll have pretty much exhausted it after that. And so together that ends up with, in future years, having about 6.3 million that we need to find other sources for compared to how we're doing next year's budget. So we wanted to look at what was possible. What did that imply? And so the first thing that we would do is we do believe that we'll have enough of the usual formula funds that provide a 50% reimbursement rather than the 100% reimbursement to backfill for a portion of that. And that could end up backfilling for about 2 million of that ongoing 6 million shortfall. We have a couple of competitive grants that are expiring. That's also part of our shortfall, but we do expect there to be future competitive grants available. So we're just assuming that we will be able to backfill that with other competitive federal grants. So that's leaving us with about 3.5 million on an ongoing basis. So for that, and that's actually, this will solve for 24-25, those first items, except for about 2.25, and then ongoing about 3.5. So we have built up some unrestricted fund balance in prior years, partly because of service reductions during the pandemic. When our revenues didn't go down, we were helped out in various ways, but we didn't have to spend as much of our local money. And even prior to that, we had built up some unrestricted fund balance. So we estimate we have a little over 8 million that will not necessarily be restored, but that we have available. So if we were to, what we're looking at in the 5-year forecast is what if we were to use about.
Yeah, hang on one second. Can you zoom that in a little, Heather?
Yeah, I'm trying to.
Oh, are you, oh, you've got it now. Yeah.
So let's just pause for a second and see if we can make this big enough. Right now, it's not really legible.
Yeah.
This is not in our package, right?
It is in your packet.
It
It
is.
is. This is page 53 of your packet. So if you have a printed copy of the packet, it is in there. But for those who didn't print it, apologies.
I don't know if that helps.
You can't get it any bigger than that.
It's on go to my PC. It's not.
Are you sure if you, oh, well. So looking at sort of the second line above the bolded subtotal potential strategies, those last two strategies, the first one is use of fund balance. So with about 2.25 million out of our 8 million, it looks like we would be able to balance the next fiscal year, all things being equal. And then we're saying, well, what does it look like if we sort of temper that down and use 2.25 million in the next year, and then down to 1 million the following year, and then none in the last year of this 5-year scenario. That would use up about 5.5 million out of the 8.4 million. So not necessarily using all of our extra available fund balance. And so that would leave the final line, which would be the gap. We'd have to find other sources. And some of the funding strategies that we talk about, we do actually have additional State Transportation Development Act Local Transportation Fund, the LTF, is provided by the state for transit purposes, but in areas like ours, it can also be used in local jurisdictions for streets and roads, a portion of it. And so right now, about 9 million of those funds are not being used for transit. And so this looks at what it would take to sort of ramp up to backfill that gap, which could be from those funds. And as we mentioned in the text of the budget, there are some other things happening as well that may provide funding sources in the future. Right now, there is a campaign by a number of transit agencies across the state to try to look for more funds in the state budget to backfill for the disappearing federal funds. And so there are other transit agencies that are much, much worse, more constrained fiscal shape than we are, such as the Bay Area, BART, and Muni, and Los Angeles, that have billions of dollars of shortfalls coming up. They are lobbying hard in the state, and if there is a change in state formulas, likely that would mean that we would get an extra share as well. And so that may relieve some of these constraints. And then in the longer term future, there's the possibility of toll revenues if and when that tolling district comes into play. And we have other strategies available as well. So this is really just one scenario for showing how the service that we proposed could be sustainable in the future.
Leo, excuse me, Molly had a question for you.
Yeah, I guess I was just curious, the timeline for, if changes were made to the STA, where would that start impacting this budget? Would it be, what can they change? Are there some that are set in stone and some that are still up on the table, or just was curious about the timing?
I don't know, Autumn, have you been more involved in the politics? I have not been closely involved, and we're letting the other big agencies sort of carry the water on this.
Changes to the STA, meaning the big lobbying push at the state level. Yeah. I don't know enough. I haven't been as involved either.
Yeah, we talked to Michael Pimentel with the California Transit Association about this, but I haven't been following the details.
I know, there's interest in a lot of different things, but I know one thing we've been a push forward is that making TIRCP, which the Transit Intercity Rail Capital Program, making funding from that eligible for operations rather than capital.
Right.
I know that's something a lot of the agencies have, I know that's something there's a lot of interest in, and then of course, the general like TDA reform also, something there's been a lot of talk about, and especially in making it so that, because right now it's just like in the more highly populated counties that LTF is required to be used for transit, and then as was mentioned in the like more lightly populated counties like Yolo can be used for roads instead of transit, but dedicating all of that to transit is also something there's definitely talk about.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to recognize that, you know, if we used all of our LTF for transit, which is what it's supposed to be prioritized for, we wouldn't have a funding gap. Because it's a $3.5 million federal gap, funding gap ongoing that is Leo is forecasting, and we have $9 million in TDA that currently is used for streets and roads in Yolo County. So we could easily use that and there'd still be money left over for local streets and roads, but just not as much as there is currently.
Our other deficit that I should mention is our capital deficit, in the sense that our fleet has been aging and we haven't been replacing it at the rate at which it's been aging, and that's essentially. And we'll have a major program as we figure out our zero emission fleet plan to acquire those vehicles. In this budget, because our fleet is aging so fast, we are proposing to replace 2 CNG buses with new CNG buses, because we simply don't have the charging infrastructure or being ready to replace them with zero emission buses at this point. And so this budget does also try to deal with that sort of aging depreciation deficit as well in that way. But we will need funds in the future, either grant funds or local match for that effort to make sure we keep our fleet operating.
So Leo, Courtney just handed out everybody copies of this table. So if you wanted to just highlight the kind of the key numbers you were talking through, so now everyone has it in front of them.
Yeah, I think what I spoke to were the main ones. The others are really simplifying assumptions. They're not meant to be predictions because it really keeps our other main revenues constant. Of course, they won't be constant. This does show, however, the magnitude of some of our revenues. For example, fare revenue is about $1 million of our budget. There's been various initiatives to hope to make the system free more broadly than it is now. We have done our free fares for youth, which has done a lot. But so that shows the kind of magnitude we would need to replace if there were an effort to do that. And then the other major thing that would add to our deficit is if our base revenues didn't rise at the same rate as our costs. Again, this for simplification just assumes inflation in both revenues and expenditures at the same rate.
Leo, I had a question about the Cache Creek mitigation funds. I see it going through 5 cycles. That's a yearly thing on into the future?
That's a great thing to focus on. It is something that is requires further work. Autumn, I don't know if you want to speak to it, but it was set up at the time when the casino was being developed, that there's an obligation by the tribe to mitigate the impacts of that casino. That obligation does not have an end date, but it needs to be renegotiated, because basically events have changed since the original time. And so we have a very good working relationship, and they continue to pay us and we continue to invoice them. But we really do need to negotiate a new agreement. And that's an interesting question as to whether it would be the same magnitude or whether it would change. But this assumes that it's at basically the magnitude they have been providing to us.
Go ahead, you have a question?
Yeah, and a question on those Cache Creek funds, because I know it was a year or two ago that there was, I think, if I recall correctly, there was like a cut in funding from the tribe, and that led to service on the line 215 being reduced. Is that Cache Creek mitigation fund, or is that a different funding source from the tribe?
This sort of started before I came, but my understanding is that the causality went the other direction, that during COVID, there was a reduction in service, and we also, and so It was negotiated that we would reduce their contribution given the reduction in service. And there certainly is room if we were increasing service to talk to them about increasing their contribution. But what we really need is the formula has sort of gotten away from the original way of doing things. And so we really want to, it would be very good to formalize it.
Yeah, so in practice, they're paying us for exactly how much service we operate, which is different than what's actually in the agreement. The original agreement was just a flat dollar amount. But in practice, we say, here's how much service we're running. And, you know, when we have, service has come back from how low it was at the beginning of the pandemic. And we sort of monitor demand, as do they. And there was in fact an article in the Daily Democrat a few months ago about kind of people not being able to get a seat on the bus for certain shifts when there's like shift changes, for example. So, you know, we are in communication with them about kind of how the service is going and what, if any, kind of changes are needed as far as increasing or decreasing the number of buses. And so that's really what that's sort of, because it's the overwhelming majority of people using that service are their employees. And they provide discounted, kind of cards for their employees to use the service. And it's actually one of our most efficient routes. I think it is our most efficient route in terms of just the sheer number of people riding every trip. The buses are full, but not standing room full. They're full, but for the most part, people are seated.
Going back, Leo, you talked about the going to a zero emission fleet. And someone help me out here. Federal government just issued a dictum that all trucks and buses must be zero emission
There's the
by
state.
2035.
There's the state, California Air Resources Board.
Okay, now I thought the feds also had something out on that. And so let's just say it's a state for the time being. What kind of effort or what kind of planning is going into transitioning to that? If you don't start at some time, I mean, some of the buses need replacement now. Some of the CNG buses need replacement now. I get that. But if you're going to spend money rehabbing old buses, which eventually, or buying new CNG buses, which aren't going to be able to be used in 2035, how will that start? Wouldn't it make sense to have some kind of a plan in place to phase in electric buses or fuel cell or whatever by 2035? Otherwise, you're gonna have a fleet of buses which just get thrown in the garbage.
So we are working on that effort. I mean, and that's in fact, that's the draft that you have under the administrative reports, the draft zero emission bus rollout plan that we are bringing to the board for approval in June. And that does kind of lay out some of those timelines for when we do plan to be 100% electric by 2035. So good guess. That I think that, go ahead, please.
Yeah, so I know we didn't touch on it, but the plan covers the replacement schedule for our buses. It explains the current fleet of buses we have.
Okay.
So we currently have 6 battery electric that we operate Proterras on the 138 Causeway Connection service. We also have diesel MCIs, and then we have CNG buses. And within this plan, it explains when their useful life occurs, and in addition to when we plan to start procuring zero emission buses. So we actually forecast to meet our goal. The ICT ruling is 2040. We project to meet that by 2035. And this plan will answer a lot of, I think, your questions in regards to at least how are we thinking about it, what are the next steps. Financially, that's a different story. We are going to be talking about that, but I guess for the context of this meeting, this document will provide you with a lot more insight into what we're planning to do.
Basically, can you just summarize that?
So this was at the last CIC meeting, which I think you were unable to attend.
Right.
We had a conversation about that. So we do have a lot of items to get through on the agenda tonight. So if we can stay on wrap up the budget conversation and maybe come back to this.
Okay, that's
all right?
important.
Okay. Were there other questions or comments on the budget?
Go ahead.
Thank you. I think just so that's great news to hear that the 42 is going to 30 minutes, or the plan is for that to go to 30 minutes all day. One question, so this season, and this probably is a good time to discuss that, or maybe, discuss, or maybe put on the long range calendar, because sadly, King season ended this last weekend. But hopefully we'll be back strong next year with a lot of people going to their games. And I know, like, for the latter part of the season, the 42 had gone to that J I Street routing pretty consistently, like during the games. But I'd be curious, and again, it could be something we talk about now, or maybe it's better suited for like a long range calendar for tying into that 30-minute service. To get the most out of that and get a lot of people hopefully on transit going to those games like next season. Like just the plan for the downtown service pattern during events there, and whether maybe what we could do to advocate for a consistent route where we can still serve stops right by the arena during games.
I know this has been a subject of much conversation with SAC-RT and the city of West Sacramento. It's ultimately the city of West Sacramento, I believe, that, you know, makes the decision about when they close the streets and who's allowed to use the streets. I know Daisy is listening in, but I hate to put her on the spot. If she wants to jump in, she's welcome to do so, but I know it's been a subject of ongoing conversation. And it is definitely a challenge, and we have to go out there and kind of manually post for detours every time. So even though everybody's very excited every time the Kings win another game, it does create a lot of additional work for the team. So, you know, it's definitely an issue we're aware of. It's a real challenge for us and our riders. But you know, I can't really tell you much more detail than that.
Daisy pop up on there.
Leo, did you have any comment on that topic? Maybe you can't hear.
Well, we can get back to you with more
Okay.
details on that.
I did have one other comment on the budget too, on, I think it's page 48, the general reserve. The 25% of budgeted expenses for continuity of service critical operations. Is that going to continue at that amount? Does that need to be adjusted in some way?
That actually is budgeted for, since it's a board policy. Since the budget is increasing, we are budgeting for depositing funds into the general reserve. For this budget, given its increase from the prior year, it would be about 460,000 additional would be deposited in the reserve to maintain it at basically a 3-month of operations level.
Thank you. Any other comments on the budget? Ready to move on? What is our next topic? We're on the item 7, YoloTD microtransit policies.
Yeah, and I'll
And
turn it over to Courtney for
taking
that.
the lead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
We have a slide for that.
Okay, so I'm a tiny bit confused at the step. There's two things about the Woodland microtransit in front of me. Which one should I be looking at and where? Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry about that.
Apologies, yeah, so if you brought a different packet with you, only look at, so first we'll start with the staff report, which covers 2 different attachments,
Okay.
which is
Right.
one that's got the city of Woodland logo on it, that's the
Okay.
Woodland service plan, and then the other one without a logo is our
Yolo, I see. Okay.
countywide
okay.
microtransit policy, and Courtney's gonna talk about that.
Okay, got it, thank you.
Yeah, so, I guess taking a step back, so when I got on board, we were in the process of implementing a new microtransit service for the city of Woodland. And simultaneously, while we were doing that, we were also needing to update our microtransit policies from Your Ride to what will be the new branded Beeline service. Part of this is because we're using some new software, RideCo is the name of the software platform. They will be the ones that will be managing a lot of the booking, ride reservations, and even payment potentially. They're one form that they can use in terms of making sure that riders know when their ride is going to be arriving, when they're going to be dropped off, and then knowing their queue for them when they'll be picked up. So in order to accommodate all of that, we needed to update our policies to reflect the user experience, as well as kind of refine some of the things that may have been a bit more antiquated. So with that, the primer, so now we're going into just some background. So as you know, October 22nd, YoloTD board voted for the promotional $1 fare for Knights Landing. Effective in January 2023, this fare is now $4 with no discount offered. So why this is brought up is that this was been a huge source of contention for citizens of Knights Landing in terms of that fare just not being accessible enough for their needs, and given the economic situation of that community, we hear that. And so part of what is reflected in this policy changes is our proposal for fares. We've also been directed based on customer complaints by the board. With that, to be more flexible with some of the offerings that we'll have, that's included in the microtransit policies. And then just as kind of I said earlier, with the RideCo software, this will allow for real-time pickup and tracking, fare collections and reservations up to 7 days in advance. And so within this, the staff report kind of going over at a high level. So the changes to our YoloTD microtransit policies include defining passenger eligibility, passenger identification requirements, passenger reservation policy, pre-boarding policy, hours of service, zone maps, fares, policy for non-service animals, rider cancellations, and the process explaining that, and then rider reimbursements. And so with that, you know, at a high level.
Sorry, can we skip back? We skipped over the fare changes. Can we go back to the?
Oh, yeah. And so, sorry, I was just reading off the staff report, but now going to the slides, go one more, Heather.
There you go.
Yeah, so the big items to highlight that I wanted to present to you all before kind of answering some of your questions you have about the broader policy document is related to passenger eligibility. So now we're doing away with the old process, which is essentially requiring microtransit users to fill out 7 or 8 page document and then send that into our staff or TransDev where we verify. Eligibility is now being determined through using the RideCo app. So, and this is in cases where a person is not able to use the RideCo app, they can still call in, but their information will be logged into the RideCo system. So we'll always be able to know who are the individuals that are requesting trips, as well as kind of their name and email. And then with that, our new, what we're proposing for fares, for one way is that they'll now be $3 instead of the $4. Youth fares are $150, and then senior and disabled fares are also $150. If their group passes are also providing a 50% discount if they're buying passes of 5 to 8 people. And so the other big change we would say is that now we're allowing for up to 7 days of reserving rides with, and this is possible through the RideCo system. And how that'll work is essentially if a person knows that, you know, for an appointment or for healthcare and they need to book their trip, they are guaranteed a window with that, with when they request that trip, and they'll be notified the day of, and then they're basically have secured their spot. And so I believe these are the biggest policy changes to cover. A large amount of this document was actually removing previous policies, as I kind of mentioned earlier in terms of defining the 10 criteria. And then next slide, Heather. And so, yeah, this is kind of what I was saying. These are at large, all of the changes that were made within the policy document. And I won't reread them again, but I'll go to the next part, which is the maps. Or let's see.
Now we'll get to the Woodlands.
Oh, right, yeah, sorry. So before going to the next part, which is specifically the Woodland micro transit proposal, are there any questions broadly about kind of the policy document itself? Any sections you want me to go over?
Can you go back to the micro transit? One more thing. So the passenger eligibility, is this for people with disabilities to get the 7 and 8 page document that's being replaced by this?
So that is our ADA policy.
Okay.
That's still separate in terms of how a rider would need to go through to make sure that we can approve them being ADA.
Got it. So this one doesn't require a doctor's signature.
Correct, but previously, just to use microtransit, if you were not an ADA passenger, you still had to submit like 8 pieces of documentation. So that is a big change because now it's just logging into the app, providing your user credentials, and then you can use the service.
A big part of that was previously for folks in Winters or Knights Landing, they actually had to document that they were residents of Knights Landing or Winters to use this service. So we were verifying their like home address and stuff, which seems a bit onerous. And so it meant that people who were trying to visit those places, or like, for example, if they were going to work, if they lived in Woodland and worked in Knights Landing, saying, then they were technically not eligible. Some people, I don't think we were strictly enforcing that, but that actually was the official policy that we had on the books, is that you had to be a resident of those communities to use the service. So that's a big part of what that eligibility was about.
Thank you.
So is rider ID a requirement of like I wonder, has that represented any barriers for folks? Cause I know ID can be.
Yeah, so really the ID is more at the discretion of driver, and it's just to make sure that passengers know when using the service that, you know, if it's a student, that if the driver asks, that they just have that fare ready. So more of just a mechanism of accountability, but not necessarily a requirement that every trip that someone takes, they're gonna be asked to be shown their ID.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you. I guess, so two questions. So one, regarding regarding like the previous residence requirement. I mean, one, I'm happy to hear that that's going away. It's gonna be anyone, the general public can use it. But also I did actually once use, like, I think I've talked about it before, but I did use the Winters microtransit service, and I of course live in Davis, not Winters, and no one ever asked about my residency. So I'm not sure, was that a newer thing, or is that like something that was implemented since then?
It was always the policy from day one, but like I say, I think that we kind of abandoned actually enforcing it because it was completely unwieldy, but it was technically our policy, or it's still technically our policy until the board approves these changes.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
And then my other question also regarding the policy around the winter service before we get into Woodland specifically is that like when the microtransit was first started, I know like the Siltrans, the B line ran between Davis and Vacaville, like through Dixon rather than Winters. That still provided like a fixed route option, like a lot between Davis and Vacaville. But since then, Siltrans, they cut the, or I think it had been fast, and then it got transferred to Siltrans. And then they cut service quite a bit on that line, so now it's like down to just a couple of peak hour trips that actually run between Davis and Vacaville, and all the weekend service was truncated to Dixon. So I'm curious as to how that's impacted so now like that makes microtransit to like the winner's microtransit is actually the only transit option to get between Davis and Vacaville. So I'm curious as to how that's impacted the service and what the plans are for potentially addressing some of those impacts going forward.
Okay, so let me just make sure I got your question clear. So for the Winters microtransit service, you're curious about making sure that since that is their only current option of transportation, based on the service cuts to Soltrans, how is that affecting the current ridership of the Winters microtransit service?
Yeah, so basically, like when before COVID, like there had been Fast had operated the line on I-80 from Davis to Dixon to Vacaville, and then Yolo bus had Davis to Winters to Vacaville as a fixed route, and then the Davis to Winters to Vacaville was switched to be Winters microtransit, but still in theory, especially given especially with the residence requirement for Winters not being enforced, that's something you can theoretically use to get from Davis to Vacaville. But then I mean, when Fast or Siltrans was still operating the fixed route from Davis to Vacaville, that probably would have been like the more practical transit option versus using the Winters-based microtransit. But now that fixed route, there's very little fixed route service between Davis and Vacaville. I'm curious as to how if there's been an impact on the microtransit, and then if there are plans for addressing that, or what the plans are for Davis to Vacaville service going forward.
So from what I'm aware of, they can still use Winters service to get to Vacaville for their microtransit service. Impacts would be related to ridership. So if you wanted specific ridership questions, then I'm sure we could get that for you and then send that in an email. Just because I wouldn't be able to tell you off the top of my head what are the ridership impacts if we've had any with, let's say, April service.
Okay.
Anecdotally, I can tell you that we do have people that do that, but you can't book a trip from Davis to Vacaville, right? You have to book a trip from Davis to Winters and then book another trip from Winters to Vacaville. So we do hear that people are doing it, but you know, it's obviously it's expensive because you're paying $4 currently for each trip. So that's $16 round trip by the time you add it all up. Not to mention you've got to wait. So it's not ideal. The question of the kind of the Soul Trans service, you're right that it's only 4 peak hour trips per day now. Yeah, I will say that is something that with the express lanes that Solano is currently building, and then we're building express lanes on the Yolo County side. One of the things that does is it creates a great opportunity to have increased transit service, right? Buses using those express lanes, because now the buses are not sitting in traffic and become a very attractive option, right? So in fact, I just had a conversation with Daryl Halls at STA today, and we've been talking regularly about the idea of trying to kind of collaborate on some sort of like expanded causeway connection that is really going from downtown Sacramento down to the Bay Area, utilizing the kind of express lanes that are going to exist. But I would say I would say that's definitely a few years, more than a few years away at this point, but would be something that would make a lot of sense as a kind of a VMT reduction strategy associated with those new express lanes.
And just a comment, I was in Dixon earlier today and I saw the Soul Trans, which is, used to be only Solano Express. What's the deal with the dual name? Just their
It's just agency stuff.
And I don't think when it had been Solano Express, because it had been under Fairfield and Sassoon Transit, and then it got switched to Soul. But like there was some administrative change where it got switched to Soul Transit. I think that might have been also, I mean, Autumn, feel free to correct me on that, but I think that's like that
I
coincided
don't
with the
know.
service cut.
I think it's just a really cool name.
Yeah, right, yeah, right.
Clearly, there's different.
Because Fast is operated by the city of Fairfield, I believe, and then Solano Express is operated by STA, so whatever. But we should keep moving and talk
Yeah,
about the
yeah.
Woodland microchip. There's no other questions on the policies.
This is quickly, what's happening with the concerns in Knights Landing, on the $4 fare? It's just, that's how it is.
Well, no,
It's reduced from 4 to 3.
You're
Yeah.
reducing it down to 3.
So 3
That's-
and then half off
Yeah.
for a lot of people, yeah.
Yeah, and the half off discount for you and seniors.
Okay.
And
they can
then, yeah,
live with that apparently.
well,
Find out.
yeah, this is
Okay,
the proposal.
okay.
And really it's our response to acknowledging, you know, based on what was in policy and to be implemented, so the $1 was a promotional fare.
Sure.
And there was always written that it would go up to $4. And so obviously when prices increase, people are going to respond to that. So at the same time, we need to
So
make
they-
sure that we're still charging an adequate level for the type of high quality service they're getting, which is door to door.
Yeah,
right,
and they
and
know
not
about it ahead of
entirely.
time, and so you've compromised, and we'll see
Right.
how it goes with the
And-
committee and with the board.
One question I have about, I'm sorry, were you finished? with your-
I'm done.
Okay, sorry about that, I just, but I noticed that, you know, the Winters one does stop at 4:30. Is there been pushback about extending it to at least be 5 or 5:30, or is there not demand for that? I mean, it seems so early.
So we haven't received pushback, I would say. These are the current times that are listed. They can be amended at a different time depending on if we are receiving more comments from the public. And that's something that is again, kind of a ongoing process, similar to the
Yeah.
increases there. So this is the times that we currently are operating on. If there's a response from more of the public that they're saying, hey, we want to have our times increased, and they're reaching out to the board members and to you guys, then we'll respond and make sure we're doing the planning and outreach needed, and then make the change.
We have heard some of that feedback, particularly from Knights Landing residents about wanting the service to start earlier. And so it is something that's kind of at the board's discretion to extend the hours of operation. I will say one of the big constraints we have is right now, each of those services operates with 1 driver and 1 vehicle per day. If we extend the hours anymore because of the union rules, then we end up having basically double the number of drivers. We'd have to go to 2 drivers, even if we extended the service by half an hour. So there's a little bit of a kind of an economy of scale question, because we can't, the way that our union contract works, we can't just kind of add increments of people. So that's one of the limiting factors, but I think it's certainly something that we do hear from time to time and would consider.
I mean, the Woodland hours are better.
So is that a good segue should we talk about Woodland?
Good, Courtney.
All right. So continuing on, so planning staff, for YoloTD over the last, I would say about 6 months, have been doing a lot of outreach and analysis to get to this point where we can propose to you guys, we have 3 proposals currently for what we would consider implementing for microtransit service in the city of Woodland. And, we'll go through each proposal today, as well as kind of the service maps that we're looking at being implemented. And then, kind of go, if you have any comments, you can just ask me. We'll go next slide.
So just, sorry, one clarifying question. So amongst these alternatives, it's sort of like, well, obviously, like, we want the big money one, right? Like, I mean, like, but why would we not want that one? Like,
Yeah.
what is our, why would we pick the less?
Yeah, so that's a good
Yeah.
question. Part of what we do during our planning and working with, City of Woodland staff is kind of being responsive to, the financial costs for this increase in service. So noting that microtransit is not cheap, compared to fixed route, we can't just say, well, here's our one proposal, take it. So we need to be mindful that there are gonna be needs and constraints based on once people actually see these different types of implementation processes, and then take that feedback, see the response from the public, and then know what financial constraints they may have and make a decision. So yes, we all want the nice, big, expensive thing, but we still have to be considerate of all options of what could be implemented. And so that's why we have 3 different alternatives.
Okay.
So yeah, for the first alternative, called the preferred alternative. What you have is Monday through Thursday, operates from 7 to 7. Friday from 7 to 11, Saturday from 9 AM to 11 PM, and Sunday from 8 AM to 7 PM. Obviously, this is providing the most service and also providing more flexibility to provide trips to riders at night if they're going out, a safe opportunity to get home. The number of vehicles that will be operating are 4, and then total hours estimate is about 12,520. What this goes into explaining essentially is for budgetary reasons. So when we were working with Woodland City staff, they wanted to kind of know in relation to total cost, and then with that cost, we're able to give them an hourly breakdown. What will be more important for the public is really the span of time of operation. And then also for the performance, you'll get the best average wait time of roughly 10 to 15 minutes. And then with the estimated ridership figures based on the city map that we provided to Rideco, what we have is from Monday to Thursday, roughly about 185 to 230 rides. Friday, 225 to 280, Saturday, 100 to 125, and then Sunday, 80 to 110. And so, with that, we're more agnostic and responsive to what the members and kind of the public are pushing for with which service they would prefer. And so, are there any kind of questions on that before I go to the next alternative?
So it seems like sorry, I have one question. So it seems like there's a couple different toggles. You're looking at both the wait times and the hours. So is it that the second alternative toggles just wait times, and then the third one?
So what
hours?
yeah, so with the preferred alternative, with the price, you're going to get the shortest estimated average wait time with the highest ridership, with the most span of time that the hours are being operated. And then each subsequent alternative kind of has a reduction in some of those times, either with span of time, the estimated total cost, and then the wait time for the rider, which affects the ridership.
So let me rephrase that. The things that we can toggle are the number of vehicles we have in service at any given time, the hours of operation, excuse me, and then the map. How big is the service area?
Oh,
Those
okay.
are the 3 variables that we can play with. The kind of what that, and then the outcome of that is how long is the estimated wait time and what does the ridership look like? And then, so the cost is really a function of how many vehicles, how many, and therefore how many drivers, do we have in a single day?
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
Oh, go ahead.
Question. Estimated cost is 1,076,000. Who pays that? Who covers that cost? The city and the And, what CTD?
So that's actually paid through the same mix of funds that we use for everything, which is we have our formula funds from the federal government, our 5307.
Okay.
And then we have the local match requirement on those, which comes from our TDA.
Okay, so it's entirely paid through
Our
ICT.
standard, yeah, it's through our standard, exactly,
Right.
transportation.
The city doesn't contribute to that at all.
No. Okay, should we talk about the two other alternatives and then also the two options we have in terms of the service area?
Okay, yeah. So, the next alternative we have is our cost constrained alternative. So hours of service span of time, Monday through Thursday, 7 to 6. Friday, 7 to 11, Saturday from 9 to 11, and then Sunday from 10 AM to 6 PM. For the total number of vehicles that will be operating, you'll have 3. Estimated hours are 9,087 with an estimated cost of $781,000. Increase in average wait time of 20 to 30 minutes. And then, as you can see, the ridership numbers from Monday through Sunday are a little less than, half of the preferred alternative. And then, any questions on that? I think kind of covered the variables that can be changed. I'll also read through each alternative. And so, for alternative number 3, this is essentially the preferred alternative slightly, but with a change to the hours of service, as well as a slightly lower estimated cost with a roughly, I would say it's a slightly higher average wait time. And so Monday through Thursday, 7 AM to 6 PM, Friday, 7 AM to 11 PM, Saturday from 9 AM to 11 PM, Sunday from 8 AM to 6 PM. We'll have 4 vehicles instead of the 3. Slightly higher operation hours with 10,594, with an estimated cost of $910,000, and then with an estimated average wait time of about 15 to 20 minutes. And so, between those 3 alternatives, we'll go to the zone maps. And so what we have are 2 area maps that we're proposing as well for the implementation of the Woodland Microtransit service. Zone map 1 is the largest service area, and really the trade-off here is between trying to decrease the average wait time. And so between zone map 1, it kind of includes more of the industrial area. And then if you toggle Heather to zone map 2, then you'll see it removes that section, which from when we did our estimates with Rideco had a slightly higher, it dropped the average wait time for passengers picking up trips.
The rationale there being that the industrial area is very low density. It just increases, if we're doing a lot of trips out to the industrial area, that means, the vehicles making longer trips, which means it can make fewer total trips per hour, right? Whereas if you have a smaller zone, then it's not making such long trips. So it does kind of, the thought there is that because that is the lowest density and least transit oriented part of Woodland, you really don't have a lot of destinations out there. You make it better for everyone else who's within the kind of the more the urban core of Woodland. So that's the trade-off there.
So with that more or less concludes kind of the presentation of the service options, the zone area maps, and then the microtransit proposal that we will be presenting to the board next week. In addition to the policy update that we have, that'll coincide the release of the microtransit service. I think that's the last slide, right, Evan? Yeah. So yeah, do you have any questions on?
Any comments, questions? Go ahead, Ian.
So like one comment just on the two different options, and the options to include versus exclude the industrial area. I guess just one thought that I'd have there is if there are gonna be, if it is having a significant impact on travel times, that would actually be a sign that there's like more significant demand there, because it would mean there are like a lot more trips going on to and from there, and that's.
Not necessarily because of that distance coverage when you're thinking about the whole city of Woodland. If it's not necessarily saying that if there's a higher ridership for moving that, it's also just like Autumn saying, if there's not that many trips, but the fact that it is an option is going to increase the average time because the area is wider. So
Okay,
just kind of throwing that out there.
It's not a huge area that you're cutting out.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah, how much, it's like a couple block perimeter, right? It's not even,
It's pretty much everything kind of northeast of I-5.
yeah, so it's really, I mean, this area is included in both, right? Yeah, so. Really not up, yeah, so, okay, well, this is interesting. It seems like a pretty significant, map either way, right? That's my feedback.
Any other comments? Questions? Anything?
I guess just one quick question on the different financial situation. So would this mean like, so the different costs and the money that goes into it, so would it mean like, if you have a like static, with this, so this is something we'd be anticipating like more of the fiscal clip type situations later on in terms of the smaller options?
Yeah, so going back to the kind of conversation Leo was talking about where we have, 5 years out, we have a $3.5 million annual shortfall that would need to be made up with basically more TDA funds. That budget assumes the preferred alternative. So you can imagine that if we ended up going with, say, the second alternative, which would cost, 300,000 or a little, 300,000 less per year. That's a $300,000 more of TDA funds that the city of Woodland gets to keep for their public works budget. That makes sense.
Thanks for the clarification.
So, I really, one thing else I'll say is I really like the simplicity of the timing on the preferred alternative. I feel like 7 to 7 for weekdays is just something that would be easy to convey. I think sometimes, like when, I feel like just simple messaging about if it's, like, it's just a lot of information for people to absorb. I feel like when you're like, it's $3, but it's half that if you have, a group and it's like, it's like there's a lot of information to take in, and it's like everything that can make it feel more simple, I feel like is gonna improve ridership, improve just, I don't know, just, so, appreciating that you have to narrow the windows for morning pickups on weekends theoretically, because, just wouldn't have the demand. But, it would just be so nice to have everything be simple timing that sort of matched across.
And I'll just throw out one thing too, that this is, the start. So depending on, once this is rolled out and implemented, we'll be able to take a lot of the data and information to see, okay, if there's more demand and if there's more public interest, and, we'll do some outreach probably once the service is implemented, just to see how the rider experience and what their feedback is. So just knowing that while this is the initial what we're presenting, things can change.
Yeah.
And we'll be responsive to that too.
Cool, so cool, I'm so excited. So when is it starting?
Yeah, so currently we're still waiting on some vehicles, so we're estimating that to be around August, hopefully beginning of August, and that's really kind of the big thing for us, is once we have those vehicles, then we'll be able to kind of establish the firm date and then present that, let you know in our board. But right now we're estimating about August of 2023, I should say.
I mean, yeah, vehicles are a limiting factor and drivers are a limiting factor as well. Transdev is well aware of this and they're continuing their efforts to hire, but we do not have a sufficient number of drivers at the moment. If we wanted to operate this service tomorrow, if we had the vehicles, we couldn't. So that's also still a very real concern.
One demand location is east part of Beamer, because you got the Hope Emergency Shelter up to 100 men and women now, tiny houses. Many of those people don't have vehicles, bicycles, certainly. If they want to get out of town, they walk or ride a bike to Walmart, basically, right now, so. Yeah,
we absolutely, we did meet with them and we heard that feedback from them as well, that they would like to have access to this service. Given that they are literally the very furthest edge of this zone, in our conversations with the city of Woodland, we understand that the city of Woodland does provide an ongoing van, I believe, that the city of Woodland pays for, and they have said to us that they'd like to explore additional options if the Fourth and Hope folks need additional transportation. The kind of that they can directly operate, that would be their preference. So that's the feedback we've heard from the city of Woodland, but, definitely open to, your thoughts, because I know you do a lot of volunteer work and are connected with them as well. I'm curious your reaction, if you have a sense of that, what the need may be,
Yeah,
if
I
the
know
needs
that-
currently being
Yeah,
met.
Fourth and Hope has a couple vans. I think what they're doing is taking them to the Walmart stop at a certain time in the morning if they want to ride back and be there, but that doesn't always work depending on what they're doing in town or out of town.
So they're actually just dropping off people at the nearest bus stop as opposed to taking them
Right.
to other locations. I see.
Sometimes they'll take them to Nugget or some specific location, but it depends what the demand is. They've got 2 or 3 vans.
Interesting. Okay. That's good feedback.
So,
We're done with the topic. Anybody else?
any
Want
other
to comment?
questions? Yeah.
Thank you for Courtney and Autumn. So we're getting to adjournment.
So I guess my only request on this item would be if the CAC has any kind of preferences or, or any feedback that you would like to share with the board, if the board's considering these alternatives, then we would love to pass that on to them.
Yeah, I would certainly like to suggest that that as a member of, as a
Sure.
Woodland rep, to the board, I support the preferred alternative. I think this is the right way to go with the wider time windows and the stronger service. I think, doing it, doing it with more gusto will probably result in more interest. Of course, you can always even ramp it up further, but I think it's really gonna be so great for the city of Woodland, so I'm just so pleased with that option.
Would you like an advisory motion or just,
If the committee is so moved to pass a motion, then I'm sure that would be
You want to
very
go
well.
ahead first, or?
I was gonna second, if that is a motion, I'll second that.
Okay, sure, I'll make a motion to suggest that we support the preferred alternative.
okay,
I'll
motion
second.
by Molly, second by Andrew. Do we need roll call for this or just all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right,
Aye.
All right.
Unanimous?
And it's unanimous. Great.
Thank you, great, yeah.
And if there's anything on, that is for the preferred alternative. Is there anything on the microtransit policies? Not to be pushy, it just, it's always helpful for us to capture if there's any kind of clear direction. We'd love to be able to share that with the board.
And I guess specifically to, regarding fares, I think that's a big point, because that's been a lot of contention with the $4 increase, so. If you have a comment one way or another on the price of fares that we're proposing, I think that'd be helpful as well.
Yeah, so, my one question would be on the disability fares. If there's anyone that gets free fares or anyone that qualifies for free fares, just curious if you're asking that.
No, and in fact, it's just senior and youth, discounted fares.
Oh,
It's
so
not for
able,
disabled.
okay,
Yeah,
don't have a discount beyond, unless they qualify for one of those other.
correct.
Interesting, so
And
was
those
it,
student discounts.
and those student discounts?
I think that $3 is probably fair. You're probably aware that in West Sacramento, they have a $3.50 service. You can go anywhere in town for $3.50 each way, so.
Yeah, I mean, it is 50%, roughly of what it would cost to get a ride hail. So, probably.
say that again, Steve.
They have this, I can't remember what it's called, it's a service where you can call if you're in a hotel or something, or don't have a car and need to get
Yeah,
somewhere.
via microtransit.
You pay $3.50 to go anywhere in Woodland one way and then pay the similar fare to get back to where you want to go.
Okay. Well, I move that we support the policy as staff's recommended.
Yeah. I second
Is that a motion, Paul?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion?
it. Yeah,
Okay, second by Molly. All those in favor?
Aye.
Say
Aye.
Thank you for your support.
So now we're looking at adjournment. I was looking at the map or the calendar for July, and July 3rd wouldn't be very good because it's on a Monday with 4th of July on a Tuesday.
Is that what we're scheduled for?
I don't know that we do, but
I doubt it, probably, yeah.
It should say on the agenda.
I don't know, but I didn't see a adjournment date, or did I?
I feel like I remember us discussing that, or like move the,
Yeah, I think it's the following week.
yeah,
The
the
following week,
yeah.
I said, are we going to Monday the 10th?
Yeah, it looks like we
Yeah.
don't have it on the agenda. Let's double check.
Yeah, I think it's,
Was
we
it-
got invitations, so I can.
Is that in the minutes? Anyway, you'll let us know. Either now or soon.
Yes, we can adjourn and we can let you know. I'm just looking.
It's June 27th.
Oh,
The
so we moved
weekend
it
prior,
up.
week prior, yeah,
Oh, that makes sense, because we want to do it before the board meeting.
yeah, great, that makes sense.
So we're going.
Yeah.
So we're talking June, did I hear?
June 27th.
Mhm.
June 27th.
All right,
We can put that on our calendars, June 27th, 6 p.m. at this location. Okay,
Thanks, everyone.
all right.
Andy, do you want to ride back to Davis?
I'm good, thanks for that.
You don't need to use the mic for that.
If you want to put your bike in the back, you're welcome to do that. I got one stop to make it faster. It'll be a
I'm
fast.
good, I'll take the reins and stuff, so.